Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us here on this episode of Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, where today we're going to look at selling. Can we say selling? Really? I mean, leadership, selling, are those two different things? Maybe not. I think you're going to find this a particularly interesting show today because we've got a really great guest, but I'm going to get into that in a minute. If you're a new listener, a new viewer, I want to thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. If you're a regular, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and keeping us right at the top in leadership, next-gen leadership, family business, and a whole bunch of other great categories. So thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. And remember, as always, we need your help in staying relevant. So please get yourself over to iTunes, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. Watching the show, listening to this show, you are either a high-level executive, you're an entrepreneur, or you're a leader in some capacity. And in whatever form of leader you're in, there's a good chance that you already realize that in today's world, as leaders, at some point in time, we are all selling. Sometimes you're selling the board on a strategy. Sometimes you're selling your team on implementation. Sometimes you're selling your kids on just getting things done that you need to get done. Well, my guest today is Lee Bartlett. He is a consultant, an author of the highly acclaimed book, the #1 Best Seller. That's not what the book is, it's actually what it's about. You'll get that in a minute. He specializes in taking new technology products to market with extensive experience in selling to the financial sector, C-suite executives. Lee has built multinational sales teams, been the co-founder and CEO of tech startups, and has sold extensively across Europe, the US, and even Asia. He shares his personal sales methodologies, his experiences in his book, his blog, both of which discuss mindset, strategies, and processes of the top salespeople. Now, this is not going to be some cheesy car sales thing. This is quite different because this guy has actually just completed a rather fascinating and extensive research project on social selling in the UK versus the US. So please, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together and welcome Lee Bartlett. Woo!
Hey.
Woo! Crowd goes wild. Welcome, Lee.
How you doing, Dov? Thanks.
Good, mate. It's good to have you on the show.
Yes. So excited. Thanks for having me.
Definitely the first time you've been introed that way, right?
It is, yeah. But I like it. I could get used to it.
You can get used to it. That's good to know. So as I said, you wrote the book called #1 Best Seller, but you
humble
to
a tilt.
Sorry?
It's humble to a tilt. The
very
#1
humble,
Best Seller.
So, but side by side, you've also got this brand new research piece that has come out. When did the book come out? Because that's also very recent too.
4 months ago.
Right. So we've got the book just hit the shelves. We've got this research project. I'm assuming, for our listener here, that these, of course, support each other. But is that true?
The book looks backward at my career of working myself to a top sales producer in a variety of different roles, selling across, as you mentioned, across border. And then the research paper, the 2.5 years it took me to write that thing, brings me up to the current day and allows me to look forward at the impact of the rise of digital networks on the sales environment, in particular in the UK versus the US, because I didn't believe that anybody had ever addressed this topic. So happy to get into that as well.
So it's interesting for me because, I sort of, it was a bit tongue-in-cheek at the beginning because, oh God, another sales book, you know what I mean? Right? We've all, and as leaders, I really think it's important that we learn to sell. I mean, personally, I will say unequivocally, I hate selling. I don't particularly enjoy that process in the conventional way. You know what I mean by that? I mean, in the way that we were trained. And we all, went to the sales school and we did the puppy dog sale and we did all these sales techniques. But it's a very different world. Selling is a very different world now, I believe at least, because I think leadership is a very different world. I don't think leadership is about dominance anymore. It's about relationship. And in my world, selling is also about relationship. So tell us what's different about, let's start with your book. What is different about that book versus the huge amount, the tidal wave of other sales books?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, if I was going to write any book, it had to be personal, which by definition made it unique.
Right.
So what I tried to do was look at my career. I was lucky enough to enjoy a very successful sales career, working myself to a top position in a variety of different roles. And nobody had ever documented how they did it. No top salesperson had ever said, look, this is how I began, this is how I got in, this was my mindset, this is how I approached a deal. And so by default, comparing it to a textbook which tells you what to do, I'm telling you just how I did it. And I'm not saying that I'm right or wrong. I'm just saying this was the process of how I went from being a rookie with no experience to being a top sales performer in various different companies. And that in itself is kind of what the market really craves, someone that's done it and is prepared to share it. But it would be particularly dull if it was just a big I am and all about successes. So it was very important to me to keep my integrity and share vulnerability in that book and the things that I did wrong as and I often describe it as being a sacrificial case study to leadership of of what a pain in the ass maybe I was.
Right.
But don't tell me that isn't a universal trend that other people are facing, leaders are facing, and they're seeing similar patterns in their teams, and they can learn from some of my successes and failures and how to deal with them. So I tried to share a holistic view that wasn't boring in any way.
Right.
So.
Well, one of the things here is that, as I said, leadership. I said this is not about sales as such, but also leadership, because you started out, as we all do, but you started as a rookie and you became a leader, not just in sales, but you're CEO of companies, you run companies. And this is really the rise of a leader, isn't it, that we're talking about? How to rise as a leader.
I still feel like I'm transforming. So you never really feel like you've made it. I think if you are a leader or you aspire to be a leader, you're constantly learning, aren't you? And you're constantly
I hope so.
Looking. And I guess, you described it in your book as entering the cave. So I tried to describe how I learned to do these things. I don't see that very often. So in that process is the dark times, the bright times, the successes, the failures. And invariably, I think whenever anybody goes through this journey, they have a catastrophic event that they have to find themselves in and recover from. And I shared that within my journey as well. And I believe that's what takes you, that kind of event is what takes you from being a rookie to a professional. So when you described at the beginning, we don't like salespeople, we don't like, I think you're describing the stereotypical cowboy salesperson.
Yeah.
But really, that's not professional selling. And my clients were C-level execs, they were senior investment bankers, they were very smart, intelligent people that required a very professional process and approach. And that isn't something you learn in 5 minutes.
No.
So to map that journey, I felt was very valuable, and it's had a wonderful reception. So I'm very lucky to have that.
Well, one of the things you brought up there was this devastating event, and I, as you said, I talk a lot about it in Fiercely Loyal, and the point where you go into the cave and you must go into the dark place, and that's what makes a great leader, because there is enough self-reflection, there is enough depth with oneself rather than here's the rubber stamp and now you've got the title. But you described it in a way that I thought was really eloquent, which is that there's this devastating event, and I refer to that in my presentations as there's a baptism of fire, and the baptism of fire will either burn you up into ashes, or it will transform you into the phoenix. But the choice is actually yours. So when I fell and I got smashed to pieces, there was clearly a moment for me, I remember it specifically, where I felt, I can stay here. There was something very seductive about feeling like a victim and feeling like, I've now got a really good reason to not get out of bed. I've got a really good reason to say, well, I gave it my best, but, shit happens and it's not my fault and blah, blah, blah. And I'd have this great story that would be my victim story that would recuse me from ever stepping forward, versus this other one, which is the baptism of fire to the phoenix, which is saying, okay, that has happened to me, and I can't pretend it didn't, and I can't, and I could go down the road of victim, but I have to transform, and I have to move forward, but without denial. And this is the trick, I think, that so many miss, is they go, okay, well, I'm just going to get up and I'm going to go forward. No, that's not transformation.
Yeah, that's right.
That's taking all your garbage with you and saying, well, no. It has to transform. Tell us about that devastating moment for you. What was that baptism of fire for you that transformed you? Because you said that was the piece.
Yeah, it was burnout. I until my early 30s, I write about this in the book, I never felt any form of limitation on anything. I wasn't scared of anything. I just saw targets and was applied everything I could. I had an endless work rate and continually achieved. And then what happened was I was subject to, it wasn't anything to do with my ability to sell. It was internal politics. I joined it. I loved my company. I loved my product, but I was just getting ground down by the company nonsense. Mm-hmm. And it beat me. It beat me. It was the only thing that ever really beat me. It wasn't the competition with selling, and it beat me so much that I left the company that I loved. And it took me time it took me so much time after I left to realize how deep in I was and how I was letting things that didn't matter to me affect my ability to earn and to deliver great business. And I think when you take the time out to write a book and to analyze how you yourself and how you approach things that you did naturally and the mistakes that you made, it's very liberating. Yes. And you start to bridge over into, well, perhaps I should go from stop doing it for myself to stopping other people, to helping other people from making these mistakes. And that was the transformation, I think, that went from being the leading salesperson in my entire industry globally to moving into a leadership role. And so it was a real pleasure to document this and to share great successes and great failures. Now, right. be in no doubt that within the book, I kept a very strong voice because I was working on very high transaction deals. I was working under very strong time constraints. And my response to many things was to be dismissive. Someone came in to try and get into my work, I'd cut them out, get out. And I kept all of that in there, even though I looked like a pain in the ass, because it's real. Right. And it's what happens. Yeah. And so it's a study.
You've not sanitized yourself.
No. So it's a study of what can happen if leadership doesn't manage these things, as well as kind of what you can become under a certain set of rules, certain systems. So it's more than just, I felt it was more than just a sales book telling you how I did it and the techniques I used, but also I feel the real values in the obstacles, the unspoken obstacles that no one wants to talk about. Right. No one wants to talk about company politics.
Well, so I want to talk about two things in that. I do want to come back to that specific moment of burnout for you when you recognize that, because I think that's an important piece, because I think that most people don't recognize when they've stepped into the fire until they're on fire, right? So,
as I didn't.
No, exactly, right? So then and I want to go to that point where you got it. And that's an important piece. But I think there's an important thing here that you brought up. Of course, it relates to what we speak about around loyalty and building loyalty. And you talked about loving your company, loving your product, being a top salesperson, and having to walk away because, as I believe you called it, company nonsense. And I think, because you just read my book, you talked about that when we were at fair. But these companies can't keep people loyal because they've not built a culture that keeps people loyal. So even if you've got a great product and you love the product and you love the company, but all that bullshit, all that minutia, all that stuff that's got nothing to do with what it is you do, but is the politics and the lack of culture and the lack of authenticity and all those things that I outlined in my book, Fiercely Loyal, are pushing away, you end up losing the number one salesperson globally for the company. Right?
That's right.
That has got to be insane.
It's mind-blowing.
Right.
It's mind-blowing.
Right.
Yeah.
So why, talk to us about that part, because I want to have the person watching this, because I'm sure there's many people watching this, maybe they're not in sales, but maybe they're an executive. They love the company. They love what it is that we do. Yeah. But they are weighed so heavily with this political nonsense, with the lack of a culture that is authentic, with lack of a culture that is purpose-driven. What do you say to those guys, the ones who are feeling under the weight of that? What do you say? Do you tell them to get out, or do you tell them to do something else?
No, I tell them this, and this is the summary of the entire section on this. I tell them to focus on a personal goal and to not let things you can't control grind you down. Because if you're like me, sales environments can be incredibly unjust. So, and you need to have constant small victories in your daily, because you're facing rejection quite often, right? You're dealing with customers. Some don't want to talk to you, some do, and so you have to have these little wins. But what happens is when the noise, the nonsense overtakes the little wins, you're on a net loss,
right? And
that in itself can grind you down. So there was some incidents, that I worked through. That I morally engaged in just because I'm a man of moral substance, but they were, as a salesperson, even as a top salesperson that's revered, you still don't have any input in the way the company's run above you. So why are you batting against it?
Well, I'm going to challenge that, Lee, because I think because I agree with you that there's stuff that you don't get to control. Whatever level you're at, whether you're the top salesperson globally, or whether you are you're a manager, or you're even you're one level of executive.
Yeah,
there is going to be stuff you can't control, no doubt about it. But what if because you talked about moral, but what if if I like my entire team, I'm a C-level, I'm enjoying the entire leadership team, I like the CEO, I feel like I've got respect here. But this company is about shit that just doesn't sit with me. I don't feel good about it. I can't control whether they change the corporate culture. I can't control what the purpose is of the company. But I know that if I'm an actually, in any way self-actualized, in any way self-aware person/leader, that is going to grind on me on a daily basis, emotionally and mentally. And I would, and I know because I go into companies, I'll say, you're in the wrong place. It doesn't matter that you're number one in the world. You're in the wrong place, because if you're not aligned with the purpose of the company, at some point in time, you're going to push it away, or it's going to push you away.
Well, it's complex stuff, as you know. It's if you've built a team and a culture around you under the envelope of the company, then that's your baby. But then if the company changes and suddenly they want to take right? that was it happens, right? And then that's taken away from you. You have an intense loyalty to what you've built. You're proud of what you've built.
Of course.
Yet you're now battling against a doctrine that wasn't there historically. And it only takes something as simple as this, a change of leadership.
Right.
It can be as simple as that. So now you're torn between the thing you've built that you love and something that wasn't in your control that's now become everything you don't believe in.
Right.
So it's complex. It's complex. Now, as a sales professional, your job is to generate revenue. Mm-hmm. It's to love your job, but it's also to generate revenue. And if you've got pretty stern targets, you better keep delivering. Because actually, revenue is what protects you as an employee in a sales environment. Mm-hmm. It gives you a big currency. So you have to stay focused on that, and you have to put that to one side. And that paradox is what I tried to describe in the book, and how I learned to overcome, to handle it. Because it will drive you mad if you're focused on the thing that isn't the most important thing, the revenue generating activity. So as I developed as a sales professional, I learned to keep my focus where it was most important and not let these things eat me up as much as perhaps it does when you're less experienced. But I agree with you 100%. Is it right? No.
Yeah, but again, you see, and this is what I'm saying about, I know you've done this great research into the US and versus the UK, but this, my research is interesting because this is an interesting crossover. In my research is generational. And so that research shows that now we know for sure millennials won't do that. They won't do what you just said. They won't go, oh, well, I just need to focus on the target of the revenue. They'll go, I don't agree with the morality of this company. There's an analogy I give in the book from stage, and I say, Ralph applies for a job. He's speaking to the HR person online. He loves the idea of the company. He's read their mission statement. Seems really great, and they're very excited about him coming in. This is $100,000 job to start, and he's looking good. This is a pretty great place to start. He's excited. He shows up for the interview. He walks into the interview reception, into the company to the reception, meets the receptionist, he says to her, I'm here to meet whoever it is in HR. Receptionist says, that's fabulous. I'll be with you in a moment. Would you like some water? And Ralph says, yeah, I'd love some water. Would you like it chilled or room temperature? He says, chilled would be nice. She goes in underneath the counter. She pulls out a bottle of water, hands it to him. Ralph goes and sits down. And she goes back to work. And then the HR person comes out and says, where's Ralph? Oh, he must have gone to the bathroom. They wait a few minutes. No Ralph. Where did he go? The answer is he left. Why did he leave? And the answer is, as much as he wanted to work there, as excited as he was to work there, as much as he loved the mission statement, you showed him you don't care about the environment because you gave him a plastic bottle of water. And his morality said, no, I can't work for him, even though I love the company. So this is a very interesting thing about employing millennials is if you've got to get them there on culture first. You've got to get them there on purpose first, on meaning first. And then, yes, align that purpose to the targets that you're talking about and push them to that place and show them how those things are at. And I think that this is a vital piece, certainly for millennials, less so for baby boomers, less so for Gen Xers, but many Gen Xers, and I can see that you're a Gen Xer, Just, right? You're just on that brink, right? You're on that brink between millennials and Gen Xers. No, it's okay. That's where you are. And on that brink, that means that you were brought into business and you were working with bosses who were baby boomers.
Yeah.
Well, now you've got millennials who are coming in under Gen Xers and boomers who are leaving. They want meaning. They want meaning. And so I'm really interested to know where, because we need to shift over to your research piece now, because it's around social selling. And in the world of social selling, who is that? That is going to be those people, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So tell us about that. Tell us about the differences between the two that you found.
So what I did was I went out into the market and I spoke to 9 multinational corporates, each with substantial teams either side of the pond, sales teams this is. And I asked them, how's social selling, how's the growth of digital networks impacted your sales teams both sides of the pond? And the answers were very different. And what was really interesting is that it's customer driven. So it's all about the customer journey. Now, to give you the very, very high level answer on it, the UK, the feeling from everybody, the global SVP of sales that were asked, everybody said, look, there's two differences in the buying process from both sides. The US buyer has shifted towards a more systematic process. So it's less human interaction because they're so educated and tech savvy before you reach them. Whereas in the UK, the customers still want the salesperson to educate them. So there's still that need for the human interaction. And this trend is mirrored completely throughout their business models. So in the US, I asked another question, because if I ask obvious questions, people just tell you what you want to hear. So I asked them, look, let me ask you a question. If you could have one experienced sales professional, account executive, or three cheaper for the same price, three less experienced sales development reps, which would you choose? And it was unanimous in the UK. We choose the experienced account rep, which correlates to the more relationship-driven buyer. And in the US, they take the more curious, more coachable, more tech-savvy millennial. 100% answer, unanimous.
Fantastic.
So it's nobody's ever kind of looked at it and gone, well, how does this work? And then there was another study, and I'll go into it quickly, Dov, because it was a company wanted to expand into the UK. And they wanted to know whether or not to build a junior sales team, a sales development rep team. So they had their number one SDR in San Francisco call into the UK. He had 60 accounts. Bear in mind, this guy was knocking down meetings on behalf of his more experienced reps, just one after another. He had 1 month to call into the UK, 60 key accounts. How many meetings do you think he booked from San Francisco in the UK for the regional directors in 1 month?
I have no idea.
None.
Yeah, that's what I was guessing. I'm guessing it's low. Yeah.
No, none. So this was a study conducted by a very well-known multinational as to whether or not we should invest in a UK-based SDR team. And so they did. And then what they found was that the UK-based sales development reps, they had no problem booking meetings. So I started to look deeper into the research. What exactly is this cultural difference? And it all correlates back to the buyer and how they're looking to purchase in its current state. Now, if you look at it a little bit deeper, you could say, well, the US lead the technological innovation. Really, they tend to be ahead of us.
That's what I was just going to say. Is this just not really? Don't you just look at that and go, okay, well, this is just where the UK will be in 5 years? That's right.
So that was one of the important questions to ask the people within the research paper and get some clarity on that. But there's tons and really I wrote it for international businesses who are looking to expand into the UK. So what are the conclusions of it? What's really important to these businesses? And what you're seeing is this confusion, vendor confusion, buyer confusion in the market with information overload, both responding very differently to this. But what does this mean? And what it means is that in the UK, they'd rather do nothing. One of the choices is not to look around at all the different vendors and look for better solutions. It's just, well, we're doing just fine. We're growing year on year. And so you can question the strategy around that. And what the buyers are really doing is looking to consolidate vendors because they want a bunch of trusted partners that are going to educate them. And this has a very big impact on international businesses looking to come into Europe in particular and vice versa, because what it says is that speed is of the essence. You better get in here and you better make sure that you have a relationship very quickly before the market starts to contract. Mm-hmm. And the kind of non-business critical vendors are put to one side. And I think it's going to get to a stage, and certainly the people that I spoke to think it's going to get to a stage where you're going to have to, if you want access to a big company, a big buyer, you're going to have to go through a trusted relationship. You're going to have to partner up with people. And so you're going to see suppliers cluster together and come together in a force, to the buyer. So
it's very interesting for me. It's very interesting because talking about these two sides, I'm part of a global research project myself right now that we're working with high net worth families and next gen leadership. Right. And what we're finding is, and this is global, so it's UK, it's Europe, it's Asia, it's the Middle East, it's the US, Canada, etc. And there are two things that come to the top. Yeah. And when we talk about next gen leaders, and the two things that come to the top is that they want technology and they want personal relationship. So it's totally aligned with what you're saying. But it's interesting that they do want both. So they don't want either or, they want both. So I want to know that if I need information, I can go to a website that will direct me and make it clear for me, but that if I hit a problem, I can talk to a person who will actually care about me and not run some script. In fact, it's very, very interesting. I think I was talking to you earlier before we went on air, that when I was speaking in Iran, one of the people I was sharing the stage with is somebody who you're familiar with. It was Anthony Thompson, who is the founder of Metro Bank, founder and president of Metro Bank and of Atom Bank. And for me, and him and I had this great conversation about this, that it's interesting he started two banks that exactly hit those two things. Metro Bank is very personal. It's this retail experience of not, rather than the block behind the glass, but really like we're having a chit chat. It's very, and people are fired if they use a sales script because it's about relationship. They're actually fired for using a sales script.
Engage.
Engaged, totally engaged. And on the other side, Atom Bank is completely, totally, and absolutely mobile. So it's not personal at all. It's very effective and efficient. So it's really interesting to me that both sides of that model are personified in those two businesses he started, two banks he started. And it really aligns with what you're saying, that both these things are needed and we're moving towards the technology. But I think you're always good. I think we forget, and I would love to hear what you have to say, but I think we forget that we are relational first.
That's right.
And as techie as we get, and as disconnected through that technology as we can often be, what actually comes down to is, do I have a relationship with you? I can trust your technology, but are you a piece of poo? Or are you actually a real person who actually cares?
And let me give you another example behind that. Buyers are procuring differently. So let me talk about a typical, one of the companies is a data vendor.
Right.
And they used to sell end user licenses to this agency that they were selling it to. And what's happened is they've had to completely change their business model because they have proprietary data and they have a sophisticated interface to access this data. But clients are saying, why am I buying this, rolling it out to my team on an end user license, training my team, and then calling you all the time because I don't know how to use your system?
Right.
So rather than buying end user, think of the resources it takes to do that. Cool. So rather than and even hiring people to run those reports. So they've got those fixed costs as well. So what they're saying now, which has changed in the last 18 months, is you run them. I'm not buying the end user license. I'll buy a wallet of data. You're the expert at farming your own data. So here's my problem. You answer my problem with your proprietary information because you're the expert at farming it. And while you're at it, I want you to aggregate all of the publicly available information around the same question. So they're leveraging the data aggregation specialists within the companies, within the vendors, to answer their questions and solve their problems rather than just procuring technology. And this speaks again to what you're saying. So how is that great for the vendor? Well, they get to charge a premium because they're running it as well. But they also get that trusted advisor status. They're deepening the relationship with the company. And they can guarantee that their data source is run when the question comes up. So it's win-win on both sides. Yeah. So the market is changing to utilize the relationship and the technology exactly as you're saying. And that's a key finding in the document as well.
So this is one of the things that I would encourage people to find out from get a hold of your stuff. But that understanding that you can't be technologically lacking, it's just not okay anymore.
It's over. Yeah.
It's just like that, well, I'll wait a while. It's already too late if you're doing it. And on the other side, that you can't ignore relationship. That trusted advisor status is still vitally important. That
Absolutely.
Relationship is so important. And I do think that very often the argument is one side or the other. Well, we have the greatest technology. It's easy for people to go through all this, and we have videos and walk through it. Yeah, but you know what? Even the most technological person sometimes wants a human touch. And there are a lot of people who still say, I want people over technology. And on the other side is, okay, you say, well, we're very relational and we create all this. Yeah, but if people have to be walked through it step by step, it's so consuming.
It is.
Right? And
for everyone.
Resources
for
are
everyone.
expensive.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've got to have both, right?
You have to have both. And the relationship, there's a lot of talk in the sales industry about how the relationship is reducing in efficacy. And it's absolute nonsense, because the way the market is moving, now it's understandable where they're coming from, because you can now inbound sell. You can hammer someone's inbox and get a good response, and that's possible. But in complex, I think the more complex you get, B2B selling, you still have to have that depth, increasingly so, especially as the market contracts. The lower barriers to entry that technological innovation have created have confused the hell out of people, and they're fighting back.
Yeah.
So
we know that more than 50% of all sales are researched online before there's ever a sale made.
That's right.
But what I think that the other side is, don't forget the other side, and that 70% of business is by referral.
Well, there's two approaches. There's the one that says we'll wait for the person to be in the buyer cycle, which is about 5% of people, and then there's the evangelistic sales approach, where I go in, I listen to your problems, and I create I form a solution for you.
Yeah.
And that is the primary strategy of smart business. It's not to wait for people in the buying cycle. It's to go in and inspire a desire, and to make sure that you understand that business and the challenges they face. And also you continually adapt your service and your product to deliver what the market wants. And that's how you differentiate yourself.
But that's leadership. This is what I think people don't understand. That's what leadership actually is. Because people think, and when I say people, I mean people in leadership positions, think that leadership is about me being the kind of leader who, when a fire starts, I can put it out. Yeah. No, that's not your job.
Yeah.
That is part of your job, but it's not your job. Your job is to foresee a fire that could start because your culture's off, because the values are off, because you're not purpose-driven, because of the way HR is run, because of the relationships pieces, because of clunky mechanisms. You've got to be able to see all those things, and that is the personal, that's the relational. And I think that so often, it's one of the things that as I said, I don't like doing sales, but I want everybody to know I love sales. And what I mean by that is, first of all, there is no business without sales, so let's just get over it. Right? Shit's got to sell, or else you're out of a job. Everybody's out of a job. So, thing is to sell. I love what Gary Vaynerchuk said. He said, people think I love social media. He goes, I don't love social media. I love that social media sells stuff, and if something better comes along, I'll jump ship. It's a smart understanding that it's about sales. But sales is about relationships, and that you as a leader have to get ahead of the problem, and you can't wait. It's too late when the person is in that emergency state and going, oh my God, it's certainly very low-hanging fruit. But at the same time, you need to be the person who can foresee the problem, and I don't know how you could do that if you're not actively growing and developing your relationships.
That's right. I always viewed my job as a salesperson as a facilitator. I'm nothing more than an intermediary between the company and the customer. Mm-hmm. And I just transfer information between the two, and I solve the problems. So that was, and I think the best salespeople approach it like that. And I think that's very important in this ever-changing market. People talk endlessly in the sales industry about the customer journey changing, good, because it won't really impact the best salespeople, because they're constantly changing with their customer anyway. They have a customer-centric focus. So it's a big differentiator. I talk about this in the research paper. It's a way to differentiate yourself against the competition and against other companies.
So give our viewers, our listeners, a tip on that point of differentiation, how they can do that.
As a salesperson,
as a leader.
So
Well, you could be a leading salesperson, but you could be a leader in any capacity.
So how do you do it? It all starts with the customer journey. You have to back extrapolate every single point of their experience, and then you have to overlay the sales process onto that. Most people start with a sales process and then take it to their customer. Right. It's the complete opposite. Right. And in particular, if you think about the more educated buyer who's coming in, they've been online, they're 60% of the way through the sales process already. And then they deal with a salesperson who historically has learned the sales process, who then takes them right the way back to the beginning. How frustrating is that? Right. It just drives you nuts. So you have to meet the buyers at the exact point in the buying cycle in which they are, which is why so many companies are now redesigning and re-engineering their sales processes, because they've lost touch. The two things are completely out of sync. So
that's what I'm saying about it being formulaic. Yeah. People follow this formula and they lose the track of the person. Yeah. I mean, you illustrated that brilliantly at the beginning of your book when going to buy that car. And you go in ready to go, here, I'll give you the money right now. And the guy goes, no, we have to go right to the beginning. And you're like, dude, and you walk away and spend the money somewhere else.
Yeah, and he wasn't focused on my needs and expectations as a buyer, which is why he failed. So I thought that was a really good example to launch my book, as a platform to launch my book, to show an example of the misaligned expectations between the buyer and the seller, and perhaps how they come together in a more professional approach.
Mm-hmm. When you talk about good managers versus bad managers in the book,
yeah.
Maybe you've already said it, but what is the big distinction between the two? Because that's not selling officially. But I'm now managing other people.
It's a good, relevant question. Yeah. So I'm referring to the outdated, egocentric, bully, do this sales manager who hasn't evolved because they've never left their office, they're still pushing paper, they haven't spoken to a customer, they haven't acknowledged the changes in the sales world and the millennial that's coming in. I'm referring to that closed-minded sales manager that I think should be extinct and is rapidly getting extinct. What am I referring to?
In the book, dinosaurs.
Well, yeah, dinosaurs. So that was what I was referring to. A great manager, encouraging, facilitating, understanding, and this is a big one for me, understanding the motivation of each individual person within the team and lifting them up individually so that as a group they are better than the sum of their parts, as opposed to categorizing. There's a big move at the moment to automate the sales process, which is understandable with the technology, but making everybody fit into a box is not my idea of great management. So my idea of great managers is what I've said. So I try to discuss and share examples of how I've seen it be successful and how it hasn't, and how, in particular, how it can detrimentally impact my ability to earn as a salesperson, because it's all shot through the salesperson's eyes. Right. And that was what I wanted. I wanted sales professionals to read this and go, do you know what? I'm in that position at the moment. Maybe I should let it go, or I should perhaps adapt my strategy to what I'm doing. And then I wanted sales leaders to look at it and go, this is just not how we should be doing this. Mm-hmm. So it was a two-edged sword.
Right. What do you think is how do you think that the insights you've got, even particularly from the research, how do you see that impacting sales training? Because and again, I know that we are leadership focused, and I want to keep reiterating to people that leadership is selling. You're selling your team constantly. Right. So even though Lee's talking about sales, I want you to think in the context of sales, not just being in revenue, although that's true too, but in selling an idea, selling a concept. How how is this changing? Even your research, how has it got to change sales training?
It's such a great question. It's actually 20% of the research paper is addressing how sales training has changed. There's two answers. Of course, everyone said yes. Of course, sales training has changed, but specifically, it's all about building a personal brand now. It's all about having this social presence. Is what tends to be focused. Now, I was consulting in Denmark recently, and I went in to talk about, the remit was, can you spend a couple of hours talking about sales skills? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And they said, do you want to go first? It was a board level meeting, and then they had the head of sales and strategy. And then I said, no, do you know what? I'll go last. I just wanted to see what everyone was saying. And it was all very sales skills based. And then I got up, and there was this kind of like closed body language. What are you going to tell us?
I've never experienced that.
And I decided to talk because I drink my own Kool-Aid and I build my own personal brand. I started to talk a little bit about the new style of selling, which is or a new dimension to it based on a change, an altered customer journey, which is you have to be seen as an expert in your field, not just when I talk to you on the phone, but also on social networks. And so I ended up, rather than spending 2 hours, I ended up spending 2 full days. I ended up staying another night and spending the whole next day on talking about how to build a personal brand, how to embrace technological advancement at the moment to help you support selling and touch customers when you're not speaking to them directly. So sales training has evolved in these companies to include this module, very much so. Now, another company said that we've had to adapt not only that, but also sales is cyclical. Yeah. So customers get very sick of hearing the same thing over and over. So we try to keep our sales training fresh to look at perhaps a slightly different angle on how we can communicate with customers just to keep fresh and bring something new. So it's, companies are recognizing the growth of the digital network, but also the fact that they need to continually readapt their message.
So what would be your tip, your clue to our listeners regarding that understanding that it is a personal brand? It's one of the things that I say to the leaders that I mentor, which is, I know you've got your position and I know you're the CEO and all the rest of it, but if you haven't built your personal brand, this is going to be a major problem for you because people are not in jobs for 20 or 40 years anymore. Even as a CEO, you're in a job maybe for 4 or 5 years. And so that personal brand piece is vital. What's the tip, the clue that you want to give our viewers, our listeners around
Just start. I mean, there's a lot of companies, a lot of leaders that I speak to that are terrified, and I'll tell you why they're terrified. They're criticized for not taking action, and that frustrates the hell out of me because sales leaders are there for a reason. If they've been there 20 years, they're doing something right. And a lot of them have been bitten by what we call the CRM revolution, where you had to have all this new CRM technology. Yeah. If you don't, it's a do or die. So they overinvested, and then they realized that all they created was just a mess within their organization. So they are justifiably cautious.
Right.
So they look at the market and they think, what the people that criticize the leaders don't tend to see is that one tiny change in a big organization is disruption right the way across it. So they're cautious and they are anxious to make a big commitment, but you don't need to make a big commitment. You can make small digital changes across the whole group. You can measure the efficacy, see if it works for you, and then build upon that. But a lot of the companies that I talk to, they just leave it up to the salespeople to build their own brand, and that's fine because it works on an individual basis. But the way the market's moving, everybody needs to be singing from the same hymn sheet. Mm-hmm. They need to have a consistent message. And so I have examples within the research paper of companies having great success from just adopting a company-wide social strategy where everybody starts to communicate a consistent message.
Mm-hmm. But again, I think that, I'm thinking about the individual here. The challenge is that often the company doesn't have a unified strategy. It certainly doesn't even have a unified culture or even a purpose. There's some horse crap version of a mission statement that somebody came up with one Tuesday afternoon because it sounded right, that nobody's emotionally connected to. What's that?
10 years ago.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things that I see in my presentations, we just talked about it very recently. I was speaking in Montreal, and I said, you know, your problem for most of you is you're leading like it's 20 years ago. And, you know, it's fine if it's 20 years ago, but it's not. This is not the 90s. It's vitally, or the 80s. It's vastly different. And so you've got to create something that's, you know, that's why we focus a lot on purpose. Because if that, from that purpose, we can generate that unified message and everybody can hook into it and tie into it and make it more effective. But, you know, you say just start, but where do they start, Lee? What, you know, I'm thinking about the person who's watching or listening who's feeling like, well, that's great information. That's like saying, well, love myself. Well, does that work? I don't know, you know.
Let me give you some tangibles then.
Please.
It starts by creating content for a start. I mean, if you look at how I've built my audience since my book launch, it's exponentially growing. And it comes down to the fact that I had all this information in my head, which historically was great, but no one knew what I knew.
No.
And so I need to communicate that over social and digital networks. And my blogs went from sort of a couple hundred shares to start with. I think I had 25,000 on one 4 months later. So you start to build, I got 10,000 followers now. Once you start to share with the world who you are, what your values are, what you believe, your expertise, then it has a big impact.
But don't you think a lot of people just feel like, oh, I'm just not, I think that most of us play down.
Don't we all?
We play down our authority. We go, you know what? Yeah, lots of people know this. I mean, I call it presumptive knowledge. We presume everybody knows what we know.
That's right.
And of course, it's not true. How do you?
And I live it. I live it. I do it myself. I sometimes before I hit send on a blog, I cringe. I think this is just too obvious. And my best, most popular blogs, my most popular article that I've written, and it still blows my mind. I've written on sales strategy. I've written on process. I've written on the importance of cross-border integration. I've written on all kinds, every kind of senior leadership topic I can think of. My most popular blog is how to construct an elevator pitch.
Absolutely.
I think you cannot be serious.
But this is the thing, right? And I think it's this presumptive knowledge because, you know, I told this story before that I have a very good friend. He is a somo mechanic, meaning he understands the way the body works better than anybody I've ever met. He's absolutely brilliant. And I'm like, dude, you got to get online. You got to start selling. You got to let people know about your stuff. It's phenomenal. And he's like, yeah, well, okay. And, you know, I'm beating him to get it out there. Finally, he goes, okay, all right, I'll do it. And I said, so what we do is make a video, no more than 2 minutes long, just showing something basic. He goes, okay. A month goes by, he's resistant. Finally, he's like, oh, okay. And, you know, it's like prying it from his hand to see this video, which he's very embarrassed about because it's so basic, he's embarrassed. And he shows it to me. We're 45 seconds in, I go, stop the video. And he goes, see, it's crap, right? No, mate. And he goes, what?
It's brilliant.
I said, it's way too complicated. And he goes, this is so basic, everybody knows that. And I said, that's presumptive knowledge.
That's right.
And so he ended up, his very first video was how to touch your toes. It's massive. Massive. Huge. Because most people's back problems, lower back problems and pain in their knees, it's because their hamstrings are not released. The point here is not about that, but the point here is about what you presume everybody knows is actually the thing that will endear people to you because, and I know what it is because I worked it out with him, it's ego. It's that if the person who does what I do looks at this, they're going to think I'm an amateur.
Yeah,
you're not selling to them.
That's right.
You're selling to the people who need what you've got. And so when you go elevator pitch, oh my God, that's been done 10 million times. But it's done 10 million times because there are millions of people who want it. It's that simple.
That's right.
And so I love what you're saying there about getting people to just share the knowledge. And this is part of the old mindset of being a baby boomer is you got to keep it all to yourself. You got to hoard it because that's your value in that you know what other people don't know.
That's right.
It's completely reversed now. Your value is in what you share, not what you hoard.
And let me correlate that to the importance as a salesperson. You need to be sharing the challenges. You've got so much content, you don't even know it. But if you're sharing the challenges that your customers face, other customers are facing similar things, they can identify with it.
Absolutely.
So you can literally, you have this content every day. You get off the phone to a customer and you've shared something highly relevant to the industry. Don't assume that other people have the solution that you know you have. So in terms of practicality, it's there. And it could be in a 200-word post. It could be in a 1,000-word article. It's not the role of marketing anymore. Here's another common misnomer. It's your responsibility as a salesperson to be seen in the eyes of your client as an expert. And then they can relate to you, and then they can share their problems, and you can start to sell them. We all hate the word, but let's use it. You can start to solve their problems, whichever way you want to describe it.
And it's one of the interesting things I was saying at the presentation I did last week in Montreal was that if you have a sales department, you have a marketing department, and you keep those two separate, you have a problem. And they were like, what?
Right.
And I said, because sales is marketing and marketing is sales now. And if you've got them separated as competitors and you've siloed them, you've got a massive problem. Every salesperson is a marketing person. Every marketing person is a salesperson. And before it used to be that sales would blame marketing. Well, they're not marketing us. And marketing would blame sales. Well, you're not closing. No. You're in this. And so what is the job? And I always say, what's the bridge between those two worlds? It's education, which is sharing. So it's great what you just said. I think it's really important. We got to close up, but I want to ask you this question. It's one of my favorite questions. I ask it everybody, which is on a day when, we all go through tough times, on a day when it all sucks, the poo has hit the pile, right? The feces has hit the fan. It's a big mess. Things are tough. You want to pull the blankets over your head and hide. What is it that gets you up in the morning? What is it that gets you going when it feels really rough and it feels like it'd be easier to hide?
My daughter is one. I think it changes as you go through life. Just the smile on her face is everything to me. So that would be a reason to never give in. But you know what? I let's just say I have no gifts on her. I've been gifted with nothing, no talents. For some reason, Dove, I wake up every day like I'm going to change the world, and I'm grateful for that. So, and I can look back to my burnout and my darker times, and perspective gives it to me. Where did I get it from? A very simple answer: my parents. They are workers. They're wonderful role models. They both worked so hard their whole lives, and whenever I look at to benchmark hard work, I simply look at what they achieved, and brought us up well. So it's an intrinsic motivation. Some people have it, some people don't. But I'm grateful for it.
We got to finish up, but I don't want to let this get away. So
go on, get it. Yeah,
hard work. Yeah, I get that. I got a work ethic.
Yeah.
But lots of people have hard work and are miserable bastards. You don't seem to be a miserable bastard. You seem to be a guy who actually is quite joyous in his life.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm asking about, because it's not just the work ethic. It's the work ethic and not the plastic, let's paint on an American smile, but, actually you look like you're in a place of joy. Or maybe you just smoked a big fat one before you came on. I don't know. Maybe you had vodka for breakfast. I have no idea.
I'd never admit it. No, perspective is what it is for me. It's perspective, and that's something that. Well, the perspective is that I've got it good. I've got it. I've worked myself into a position. I wasn't always. There's times where you're not always joyous and happy, but I can benchmark it against other people and people that don't have it as well as me, and I feel like I can.
So it's gratitude.
It's gratitude. It's gratitude. I'm grateful for my lot. I'm happy with what I have. So and it takes I think it takes time to realize that. And I think when you're older, you get that kind of liberation where you know what, this is all right. I didn't feel it with my 20s. I just felt like I wanted to achieve. Right. But I felt like I've done some good things now. So, and that's what my book's about. So
if you had to leave, we're going to finish up, but if you have to leave our audience with one single message, what is it?
Gratitude. It's all, when you try not. Here's my message. Something that I did for years. Try not to miss the journey and focus on the end goal, because actually, if you can enjoy the journey, you've won. I used to be so goal focused, and I'd work and I'd kill myself almost. But now I've learned to enjoy the journey, and it changes the game for me.
Very cool. Thank you, my friend. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you, Dov. I really appreciate it, mate.
Please tell our listeners, our viewers, where they can find out more about you, about your book, about the research paper, and potentially bringing you in to speak for their organizations.
Sure. Everything's on Lee Bartlett bestseller.com. My research paper is free. Please download it. I hope it adds value. That's my intention. My book, again, is on Amazon, all the usual suspects. It could be accessed from my site. All of my content's there. Strategy, elevator pitches, everything you can imagine.
Right.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear from you. Please connect with me on social. I'm very active on social, and love to hear from your
Twitter
listeners. So thank you.
What's your Twitter handle?
At No.1 No.1 Best Seller.
Okay, at No.1 Best Seller, and the URL is leebartlettbestseller.com.
That's it. Thank you.
Fabulous. So thanks for joining us. It's been great having you here. As always, I always want to remind our listeners to make sure that you listen back, take notes, pay attention, and of course, as always, I encourage you to write to Lee, to connect with Lee, tell him what you got out of this show, how it added value to you, and reach out to him, find out how he can help you, how he can be of service to you. I want to really thank you for being here with us today, Lee. It's been a joy having you here, my man. Really good. And I want to thank you, the listener, for joining us. And remember that the companies that get to the top and stay there are purpose-driven organizations. If you are truly serious about having the laser beam clarity around your company's purpose, about building a culture of high-performing, highly engaged leaders who are fiercely loyal to your organization, then reach out to me, Dov Baron, at fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide the essential leadership skills for today's good leaders who are committed to becoming great leaders for tomorrow while growing their people and their bottom line. Because the hard skills may get you there, but it's the soft skills that will make you not only get you to the top and keep you at the top, but will make sure that you're not alone when you get there. Also, remember to stop by the Matrix, matrix.fullmontyleadership.com, where you can get my Authentic Leadership Matrix self-assessment tool. It's $197. You get it for free for tuning in today. So go to matrix.fullmontyleadership.com. This is Dov Baron, fullmontyleadership.com. I want to thank you for joining us. And, as always, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious about how you can connect technology to relationships and build greater sales, because you are always selling. Till next time, this is Dov Baron, and I am out.